Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on mostly color grading and a little bit about creating styles as well. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. If this is your first webinar and you don't know who you are listening to, my name's David. I'm part of the software sales team based out of Copenhagen in Denmark. As usual, we have 60 minutes today. We might not need all of that. It's a relatively simple subject. You're very welcome and encouraged to ask questions throughout. If you look at the bottom of your GoToWebinar control panel, you'll see the last section is called questions. Put a question in there, that will come straight through to me. If you're on your iOS device or Android device, there's a question mark icon at the bottom of the screen. Tap that and you can ask a question in the same way. There is lots of you this afternoon or this morning, wherever you are. So please try to keep your questions on topic, not really for my benefit, but really for everyone else listening, so we don't go off topic as well. And I'm sorry if I don't get to your exact question. I am recording the session too, so you can always review again at a later date. And roughly in 1 hour, you'll get a follow-up email, which has all the details of where to watch the recording and a few other things as well. So let's come out of this and go straight to Capture One. To help you see the cursor, let's just turn on Mouse Locator. And then that way, just to help you find the cursor, then you'll be able to see that up on screen. So this morning, as usual, this is the second run of the webinar. Let's just get the questions up so I can see that. The second run of the webinar, and the first thing, based on what I learned this morning with the crowd, we talk about some of the stuff that the color balance tool isn't designed for, and I'm talking about this tool, the color balance tool, and how it compares to the color editor tool and perhaps the white balance as well, because there was a little bit of confusion over that. So in the color tool tab, this is where the color balance tool sits. If you're on the default workspace, also along with the color editor and the white balance tool. So I'm just going to bring those out for a second. Color editor as well. Let's just hide our tools just to kind of give us a bit more space. Let's just tuck the color editor away for a second. So first of all, a couple of people are asking, let's clear up a few things about the color balance tool. First of all, the color balance tool is not available as a local adjustment. I think that's important to point out first of all. It is divided into shadows, midtones, and highlights, which we get to, but the color balance tool, its primary purpose is to place a color tint over the whole image. And that's divided into shadows, midtones, and highlights. It's inspired by color grading, very much from the video industry. If you're used to working with something like DaVinci, which is a color grading application for video editing, then this is the inspiration from it. So it's not designed to correct color, to change the color of something to something else. It's designed to place a creative color grade over the whole image. If you need to do something else, then you're probably more interested in looking at the color editor, which is capable of working as a local adjustment. And the color editor is different in the fact that you define a color and then you adjust the color with the color editor. For example, the color balance tool, once again, is for the entire image. So two quite different tools. So the color editor, again, designed for targeting an image. Let's just find something with a bit more color. Here we go. So color editor designed for picking a color and then changing the appearance of that color, however it may be. And then the color balance tool designed for placing a color grade over the whole image itself. So let's just reset that. We get rid of the color editor right now and then clear up the other point of confusion, which was about the white balance and color balance. Just bear with me 1 minute. I just have to help someone with no audio. Again, if you ever have an issue with audio or screen freezing, then the easiest way to fix it is to exit out and come back in again. Okay, so now the white balance. Someone also said this morning, well, surely color balance and white balance, they are exactly the same. That's certainly not the case. Um, Remember, white balance is all about finding a neutral point so that all the other colors drop into place. We could certainly argue whether you want to have the mathematically perfect gray balance or something that looks more pleasing to the eye. But just to kind of prove that white balance and color balance are different, if you mess up the white balance, for example, let's say I do that, there is no way that I could take these tools and then somehow try to correct that white balance. It's two completely different things. Also, to clear up another common question that was popping up, was what particular order should I do the tools in Capture One? Is there some kind of golden set that we should do this first, then this, then this, and this, and so on? And the answer is no, not really. But trying to adjust an image that perhaps has poor exposure and poor white balance is not a good idea. So if you have an under or overexposed image or an image with incorrect white balance, best thing to do, fix the exposure, fix the white balance before moving on to anything else as well. Traditionally, something like color balance or applying a color grade might come later on in the process more than anything else, because that's almost like when you've decided on your contrast, exposure, white balance, and so on, you then might like to think about applying a color grade to the image. So, with all that in mind, how does the tool actually work? So, it's presented like so with 5 different tabs at the top. So we have a master tab, a 3-way tab, which is the shadows, midtones, and highlights. And then the shadows, midtones, and highlights are also shown separately. So if I make an adjustment, say to midtone, it's reflected here in the midtone tab as well. Purely if you just want to have a bit more real estate on the wheels by working on them individually as opposed to 3-way, for example. So no difference there. It's worth mentioning that the color balance tool can be enlarged. So to make it a bit easier to use, you can grab the corner and just drag it out just to make those wheels that little bit larger. Let's get rid of white balance while we're here as well. So how does the tool actually work? So let's first of all deal with the master tab. So the master tab, and I guess the closest analogy I can give to you to compare it to something physical is that really the master tab is simply like putting some kind of colored filter in front of the lens at the time of capture, except now you've got all the possibilities of choosing any tint. So if you grab the center circle and move that towards the color hue of your choosing, then that will apply that overall color tint or grade to the image. Now, the further you move it out to the edge of the circle, the greater the intensity or greater the saturation, if you like. So anything from here to here, it's the same color tint, just increasing in intensity, like so. You'll also see that as I move the circle to the center and towards the outside, you'll see the slider move on the left-hand side. So if I just grab this slider, then that maintains the same color tint, but just moves from the inside to the outside. If you're working with a trackpad on a Mac or PC, for example, which is gesture capable, if you do a 2-finger slide up and down, then you can actually move the point around the circle like so, if you wish. So 2-finger drag can do a similar thing. If you want to reset at any point, just double tap, and that will put the color circle back to the center, so neutral, basically. So if you just want to tone the image in any particular direction, just pick it up and then drag it where you like. It's as simple as that. So the master tab, one tone over the entire image. Question from Kiel, if I've got that right. What's the easiest way to get results like you can from alien skin? Are there presets or styles? Well, keep watching because yes, there is some presets and styles, and I'm going to give away a few at the end of the webinar as well. So now we come to 3-way, like so. So we've got shadows, midtones, and highlights. Operation is identical almost, except that we're now targeted to the shadows, midtones and highlights. So this image is quite useful because it has a bit of everything. So if we look at the shadows, which would be sort of down in this area, kind of up here, I guess, and just drag that, let's just cool that down, you can see that applies just a nice cool tone to the shadows. If we do the opposite and go to midtones, which is probably sort of around here, and drag it in this direction, then we get a nice warming effect. And so for the highlights, probably along the roof line here, then that warms that up like so, as you can see. So we're still getting the cool tone in the shadows if I just drag that back and forth so you can see. If we want to see a temporary view of what's going on with this tool, and indeed any other tool, if you hold your Option key down or Alt key, click and hold the reset button, then you can see a before and after, for example. And remember to reset any individual one, just double tap and that will take you back to 0, for example. Additionally, to the right of each of the color wheel is a further slider, which is the lightness slider. So if I pick that up and push it up, for example, that will lift the shadows or darken the shadows. Equally for midtones, we can lift the midtones or darken the midtones. Equally for the highlights, we could lift the highlights or darken the highlights. So that gives you an additional way to adjust contrast, because you can see if I darken my shadows and then lift the highlights, I get a more contrasty image. If I darken my highlights and then lift my shadows, then we get a flatter image. It's not necessarily better or worse than using a contrast slider or using a curve, for example. It's just a different way of doing it. And some people, customers I should say, even with everything set to 0, you can still use this tool as a way to manipulate contrast if you wish. While we're on the subject of levels, curves, and so on and so forth, just to point out, if we bring up a floating tool, let's just bring up a curve, because you could argue, well, what's the point of using the color balance tool? I could use the curves in their individual channels, which you certainly could, but the main difference between using a curve and using the color balance tool is that if I manipulate a curve within its individual channel, yes, I will influence the color, but I also cannot help to influence density to some extent as well. So the two are intrinsically tied together, unfortunately, whereas in the color balance tool, color tint and density are two completely separate things. So it means the adjustments aren't working against each other. You can decide on tint and you can decide on density as two separate things. Using the curves tool, unfortunately, that is not the case. You will always affect one with the other. So let's reset that, take that away. So color balance tool, much simpler to use, gives you that separation between the actual color and the density as well. Julien, you must have missed the first part. Why would you use the color balance tool for toning instead of modifying the white balance? Because it's two different things. The white balance is going to be operating over the whole image. Sure, if you wanted to, let's just create the white balance. If you wanted to use white balance, we can go warmer and colder and so on. But that's just warm cold, for example, on the Kelvin slider, not the complete range. Like if we want to go cyan, for example, we could do, and so on. So you just don't have that range that you do in the white balance. The white balance is just for that, for adjusting the white balance. It's not the same adjustment as placing the color balance. Far less scope, for example. So two totally different things. Could it be used for black and white photos? Great question, Ricardo. Hold that thought, because yes, it's really good for black and white photos, almost like a triple toning as such. Is adjusting highlights and shadows in color balance same or different than using those adjustments in high dynamic range? Slightly different, really. I mean, like if you really want to kind of get more shadow detail, then it kind of sometimes makes more sense to actually use the tool with that name. Let's just create HDR, high dynamic range. So let's just reset everything. So if we lift the shadows, see it's ever such a slightly different look. If we compare that to lifting the shadows, slightly different. It's not really the same thing. So if you've got two dark shadows and you just want to get a bit more shadow detail, you see it's a little bit more. If we adjust that and then do that, subtly different, ever so slightly different. So use this rule. If your shadows are too dark and you need to just raise the exposure of the shadows a bit, then shadow slider makes sense. If you want to have softer contrast, for example, manipulate the contrast, then use the slider in the color balance tool. So it is a slightly different effect. Martin, same question as Ricardo. Could we use it for split toning and black and white? Definitely. Yes, definitely. Good tip, or maybe a better use of language from Russell. Luma is separate from chroma. Exactly that. So luminosity and chroma is totally separate. In the levels and curves tool, it's not. So are changes with the color balance tool indicated in the histogram? Let's just show you. So if we bring up the tools, let's mess around with this. Yep, you can see the histogram changing like so. So yes, it is, very much so. Let's pop you back. What about skin colors? Pamela's asking. What about skin colors? You have to expand a little on that question. Mark says, can you do selective changes by using masking tools? Mark, you must have been late as well. No, you can't. It's not designed to work as a local adjustment. It's designed as a color grade over the entire image. If you want to do selective adjustments, use the color editor. Okay, so moving on from that, let's get rid of high dynamic range and look at about some more specific stuffs. Now, again, there's no real hard and fast rules as such. If we look at, oh, those two images are the same. Now, before applying your color grade, it makes sense to kind of get your base adjustments in. So in this case, if we just pop you back for a second, if we were going to adjust this image, let's do Command R to reset. So that's how it came out of camera. Pretty nice exposure, pretty good white balance shot. Not really a great deal to do, but we could probably get a few base adjustments in first of all before moving on to playing around with the color balance tool. And as I said, no hard and fast rules with the color balance. It's a visual thing. It's not a numbers thing. It's not a math thing. It's about applying the creative color grade that you think you want to have to the image. Now, a good tip I got, maybe doesn't apply to this image, but is either try to get influence from the image itself to think about the color palette that you want to have as well, or totally disregard that and just go ahead and design the sort of colors that you want. So in this case, if we did the sort of cool shadows and warm up the mid-tones, is maybe affecting his jacket a bit too much. So maybe if we just went highlights, that will give us a bit of warmth in the background, but not affecting the jacket so much. And if we option click once more, then we can see the effect that our color grade is having. Don't feel you have to use all three wheels, of course. If you just want to use the shadows, then fine. It doesn't have to be all of them as such. And then if I just lift my shadows slightly, that has maybe too much of an effect. If you want to reset the sliders, just double tap. So let's just do that a bit more subtle. And then that's just another way to play with contrast as well. So again, option click, see where we go, and that's before and that's after. Maybe that's too much. So again, just a simple visual process really about creating that kind of grade. Looking at some other shots, and maybe this is a good time to talk about the black and white side of things, is let's look at this sequence. So this is a full color shot. Do we have adjustments on here? No. So that's pretty much the shot as it came out of camera, I think. Yeah, so that's the shot out of camera. then of course a black and white, and then something in between. So going back to Ricardo's question and Martin's question, how do we sort of achieve that somewhere in the middle of not color, not black and white, but some kind of triple toning aspect? And the best way to do that is really to combine the color balance tool with the exposure tool in particular. So let's bring this out again and let's grab the exposure tool like so. Hide our tools. Now generally if I'm kind of working with doing color grading stuff, I'll show you how I like to have the setup and how we could actually save that. So if we stick those together and change that to master. So now we've got the master tab, we've got the three-way tab, and then we've got the exposure tool all as one floating palette like that. Now if it's useful and you're working with two monitors, which most of us do, then there's nothing to stop you having that sitting on another monitor so you have an unobstructed workspace like so. If you want to save this, then of course a smart choice would be to actually save that as a workspace. So let's just tuck that over there. Window, workspace, say save workspace. Let's just call that color grading, for example, like so. And save that workspace. Now it means we can go from whatever your, pick the wrong one, whatever your standard workspace is, for example, and then flick to color grading workspace like so. Also, another good tip, as you can see it up here, is to add, if by right clicking and we say customize toolbar, we can add the, let's just move you out the way. We can add, where is it? The workspaces icon, it's already there. The workspaces icon to the toolbar, which gives you a faster way to switch workspaces. So I can go capture on 10 and then color grading, nice and fast like so. So now with this possibility, we've got our master tab, we've got our three-way, and we've also got saturation. If we just reset saturation for a second, you can see it's a bit too much. I don't actually have a huge amount dialed in on shadows, midtones, and highlights. We've got some general warmness on the master tab, but now it's a bit too oversaturated. So if we drop saturation down, then you can go either obviously to a complete black and white, or a kind of almost black and white. So it makes these much more subtle, the various different adjustments. We can move them with greater depth, but we do get a really nice possibility to have a triple tone as such. Just to remind you, in the black and white tool itself, we do have a split toning tab, but if we enable black and white for a second, you can only tone the highlights and choose how saturated you want that to be, and the shadows, for example, and that's it. So you don't really have as much control as you do in split tones, as you would do so by using the three-way controls and playing around with the saturation as well. And of course, don't forget, you can also influence your contrast all in one place by tweaking the sliders to like so. Philip is asking, on some of my images I shoot in color balance at high ISO. The shadows have a green cast due to mercury vapor lights mixed with tungsten fluorescent, and the shadow color balance tool set to kill the green cast has been a lifesaver. Oh, there we go. That's an interesting use of it. Hang on, my colleague Drew is in the house, although GoToWebinar control panel is being a pain. Let's make you, just going to make my colleague Drew an organizer, and he sometimes lurks in the background and helps answer a few questions as well. I'm going to mute you as well, Drew, before you start swearing. Oh no, you've already done it yourself. Great. So where were we? Will the webinar be recorded for later viewing? Yes, Radislav, it will be. Don't you worry. Okay. So that's a good tip from Philip. He was saying that shooting at high ISO with green cast in the shadows Then the shadow color balance tool sets to kill the green cast has been a lifesaver. There we go. So where were we? Okay, so what I was saying was mixing color balance, master and three-way, and the saturation slider gives you another way to sort of play with the tools as well, apart from just the pure color balance tool on its own. You're also, if you can see the keen-eyed amongst you, there's also some grain kind of put on this image as well, which is also often a nice thing to add in when you're doing color grading as well. So before we think about saving that as a style, for example, I'll just check if there's anything else that we can mention with in that particular. Oh yes, so far we've been looking at people, but again, if we think of the same thing, if you're wondering what on earth this is a tree with, there's actually tree sap pouring out of it, which kind of throws in this good color. There's the whole, there's the shot in its entirety. That's quite an aggressive crop, but that's just full color, no color balance or nothing. And then we go to adjustments with the color balance tool and saturation and so on, and then we go to just pure black and white. So if I flip between the two, slightly different look. I mean, we've got barely no color peeking in there, but it's just ever so slightly different than what we're seeing. Of course, what we could also do if we just reset shadows and highlights, and again we just want to put some kind of warm tint over the whole image that's almost black and white, then we could do a similar thing as well, or indeed cold tint or whatever. Possibilities are endless, of course. Question from Raphael. The saturation slider on Capture One does some kind of selective saturation, something like vibrance on Photoshop. Yeah, you're correct, actually. So just maybe something to bear in mind. When you are doing positive saturation, colors that are already well saturated will receive less treatment than those that are not saturated. But important to note, when you go negative, it's completely linear. So from 0 to minus 100, it's totally linear. On 0 to plus 100, it depends on the image content. So good something to point out as well. So yes, so that was just color only. That was playing around with the color balance tool, and then pure black and white. So it just does give you more scope to play around with various different tints and tones and things. Great fun to do. So yes, but mostly we've been looking at people. Now in terms of Kiel's question earlier about presets and so on, if we look in the color balance tool, let's just grab Anne Sophie here for a second. If we look in the color balance tool, this you'll see already has just a little tint to the shadows like so. But there is some built-in presets, and if we just whiz down this list, then there's various different things that you can try, like so. And all you need to do is either mouse down the list, or you can use your cursor keys to go through, and you'll get an instant preview, and you'll see the color wheels change like so. Some time ago, because this tool was actually introduced in Capture One 9, I approached a video colorist, because they're a bit more, video industry's kind of been a bit more ahead of the game compared to the stills industry with this kind of tool and effect. So if you go to our blog, blog.phase1.com, just do a search for color grade. It's probably the easiest way to get to it, and you'll find a few articles on color grading, basically. This one here, colorist point of view. So I asked a colorist, is actually from Canada, Charles Etienne, to have a look at Capture One and see what he thought of the tool from his point of view for color grading. What he also did was give 4 different grades or tips on the sort of stuff that he does in the industry as well. So there's 4 different grades like so. So I've recreated those, and you can see them here on the user presets, for example. So in the follow-up email that you're going to get in roughly an hour's time, there's also a download for these presets that you can play with as well. And of course, there's nothing to stop you making your own presets as well. So let's think about if we wanted to save something as a style. So let's just let's just grab this one. Let's think, you know what, I quite like what I've done here, for example, but I want to try this across other images as well. So I need to save this as a style. Now remember, a preset is just the tool itself. So if you've got a color grade that you want to save, we can just save that like so, in case that was a bit quick. If you look in the top right of the tool, the three lines say save user preset, and we would say my fantastic color grade, for example. And then now if we would go to any other image, let's just grab one down here, we could then pick it up, my fantastic color grade, like so. So that's just the color balance tool and nothing else. So whatever else was said on that image, you saw it had nothing to do with, if we pick a different one here, it doesn't affect our exposure tool, for example, it's just the color balance tool. So that's just known as a preset in Capture One. If we go back to this shot again, and let's say we want to save the whole style. So that's all the various adjustments that have been placed on an image. Then it's a slightly different process. So what we need to do is, if we just bring our tools back, is go to the Styles and Presets tool tab, or Adjustments tool tab, which is this one here. Go to the Styles Presets tool and save that user style. Now the important thing is that you have to make kind of some intelligent choices on what you would include in that style, because some things are really only specific to a particular image. So for example, if we look down what's included in this image, we have an exposure adjustment, which probably doesn't make sense to apply as a global style, because exposure compensation is something specific to a particular image. Saturation does make sense. We've got our color balance tool, which makes sense. We've got black and white. We actually don't want to have that because that's not part of our style. We've got some vignetting, which makes sense. It does. We've got some grain applied. We've got some spot removal, which doesn't make sense because spots could be anywhere on particular images. And we've also got some metadata like a color tag, which certainly doesn't make sense to have as a style because it will overwrite any existing color tag, which could be on an image. So we want to turn that off as well. So don't just go ahead and save the style straight away. Actually uncheck the stuff which doesn't make sense. So now I can save that and call this pastel grain goodness or something and say save. And now that becomes available to apply to any other image. So let's just go back to my default workspace for a second and then pick up something else. Let's just grab unadjusted image here, for example. Let's reset that. Hide my browser, and then if we go to styles here, we can say user styles, pastel grain goodness, like so. But it still means if I need to play with exposure, if that needs adjusting, or contrast, I can do so. So the style shouldn't be adjusting things that are unique to certain images. Otherwise, you're going to have weird stuff going on when you start to apply styles, for example. Now again, to make the style application perhaps a bit easier, if you right click and say customize toolbar, you can grab the styles icon, put that up on the toolbar, and then it doesn't matter where you are. So if I was to go into user styles, I can use my arrow keys, and then we can go between my different styles or also the built-in styles as well, and have a look through those as well. So it does kind of make sense to add the styles icon here, because then you can always access your styles without having to go to the styles tool itself, or you could of course always float the styles and presets tool if you wish. Okay, having a look at some questions. Can you control the opacity of those color balance presets? No, you can't. That was Paolo asking. But of course, if you come to a preset, so if you think, oh, actually, I quite like whatever, velvety warm. Let's just reset this image. I quite like whatever, velvety warm, but I think it's a bit too much. There's nothing to stop you just adjusting that and then saving your own preset. So you can always use those as a base point and save them, but no, you can't change the opacity of the color balance tool. Okay, Pamela says, in beauty, I want a cinematic tone with a pale silver skin with blue shadows. I'm having trouble achieving. Unfortunately, without actually seeing some examples, it's hard to suggest, but I think you can always quiz our forum because we've got forum.phase1.com. There's plenty of good sort of color grading and retouching forums out there as well. So without really seeing examples, it's hard to suggest. But don't forget, you've also got in the color editor itself. You've also got the skin tone tab, which you can also use to choose skin tones and affect hue, saturation, lightness, and uniformity as well. So it's probably worth having a look at the previous webinar when we talk about color tools, so you know exactly how the skin tone tool works there as well. Okay. Let me see. Will the presets work in version 9? Good question. I can't guarantee it, Helen. It should do, but they were created in version 10, so I can't guarantee it. So, no, Martin, there is no Luma slider in the master tool tab. Not much point for it, really. Like if you want to raise luminosity over the whole image, then that's kind of exposure, really. So doing a similar thing, but no, there isn't one in there. Can we show the temporary undo again? Yeah, the temporary undo, if you have a color grade, let's just pick a color grade. Let's just reset this image, for example, and throw in my pastel green goodness. If we want to see a temporary reset of an individual tool, option click, that shows you the before and after of that individual tool, for example. There is no global before and after, but what you can do is do Command R, which resets, and then Command Z to undo that reset if you like. Or if you want to, you can say make a new variant, and that will give you a virtual copy of the image, and if you select both, then they will show up side to side. For example, just make sure you have multi-view on up here as opposed to primary view. So primary view is only going to show the one image, the primary, and then multi-view is going to show both, for example, like so. If you want to replicate the look of a shot, can you import and analyze the color balance? No, it would be nice, but no, you've got to do the donkey work yourself, I'm afraid, but there is no analysis. How can you have all the thumbnails in your main window? That's simply hide viewer, like so. So I just use, you can see here the shortcut key, I just use this key, which is below my escape key, and then that means I can show and hide the viewer very quickly, like so. Okay, if you have 3 color balance tools set up and you've modified each, when you create a preset, will it incorporate all the changes? Yes, it definitely. It will always incorporate all the changes. Remember, the fact that we're replicating, let's do it right now. Create floating tool, color balance. No, not color editor, David. Window, create floating tool, color balance. Look, if I drag it here, see it's the same tool, it's just graphically displayed in 2 different places. So yes, and if we had master, for example, and shadow, and we saved that as a style, then it would incorporate both of them. Don't worry. Let's remove that one. Please clarify what's the difference between styles and presets. A style is a multitude of adjustments. So it could be a color balance tool, an exposure adjustment, a contrast adjustment, and so on. So a style incorporating many tools. A preset is just from one individual tool, for example. So a preset, one individual tool, style, a collection of tools. Okay, going back to kind of keyboard shortcuts and other stuff, if you're kind of interested in getting into color grading, what's also very common in, let's just, whoops, turn our video off. What's also very common in the video industry is hardware input panels specifically for color grading. So if you didn't know, Capture One 10 has an integration with the line of tangent panels, the one you see here called the Ripple. This is a very affordable option. It's plastic materials, but the trackables feel great. The rotational button here feels very nice, high quality as well. And they also have the element range, which if I can bring that up, this one here, which kind of achieves exactly the same thing. This is 4 different panels, also all compatible with Capture One, but higher quality materials, but of course at a higher price point. You can probably guess how they work, but in case you can't, I'm just going to turn on my webcam for a second. So hopefully, let's just bring up my webcam. So you should be able to see one of the panels here right now. So this is the element panel, and you can probably guess exactly how that works, I would think, because we have the 3 balls or tracker balls like so, shadows, midtones, and highlights, as you can imagine. And then simply, really, you don't have to have the tools visible in Capture One, so they could be hidden, for example. And then really, just by picking up the ball, if I just roll that round to the left and this one to the right, and these, then you can apply your color grade in a tactile way as opposed to pulling the sliders around. The outer ring, this one here, this is your luminosity or lightness ring. So if we go to the right, that will lighten. If we go to the left, that will darken, for example, like so. And if we want to preview, we can press, let me just check you can see my webcam. So, and then we've got B over here in the corner. So if we press B, then that gives me the preview option like so, so you can see before and after. Above we've got 2 buttons as well, so these are reset. So if we tap those, then that will reset either just the tint or the luminosity itself. So the left hand one does the tint, and then the right hand button, this one here, resets like so. So a really nice way to do color grading. The benefit, of course, is that you can use 2 hands at the same time. It becomes somewhat quicker to dial in your color grades, and of course you don't need to have the tool visible as well. You can see up on the LCD display, which I know is probably a bit tricky to see, but you also get a graphical representation of what you've applied. On the Ripple model, which doesn't have the LCD display, you actually get a little head-ups display on a Capture One itself. So really, really nice kit to use if you think this is something that you're going to be doing a lot, for example. So let's stop sharing the webcam for a second. Oh, actually, one last thing I wanted to talk about. Whoever was asking about keyboard shortcuts with like hiding and showing the viewer, for example, like so. So you just saw it in the corner, but also I have been using the Capture One keyboard. So this is a keyboard made by Logic. It's available only from Phase One partners. So go and see your Phase One partner if you're interested in one. But it has all the shortcuts printed on it. And then this is the one I use for hiding and showing the viewer, for example. The same goes for the tangent kit. If you're interested in tangent kit, you can talk to your Phase One partner as well. It is totally configurable too. So if you want to change the actions of any of the various panels, then you can do so in the tangent software as well. So if you wanted to change one of these to be master, for example, if we go to color balance, then we've got master tone as well, like so. So you can always change the trackables to do whatever you want. You don't need to do any setup. It's pre-configured for Capture One, but if you wish, then of course you can also totally remap it as well. Okay, so capture on keyboard, tangent panels. Let's stop sharing the webcam and just have a quick check on questions. Mark says, color grading is very similar to DaVinci Resolve. Yes, definitely. And as Drew says, inspiration is everywhere. And really, the video guys have been kind of ahead of us compared to the stills industry. So it's really nice to add an extra dimension to any image. I mean, I've got mostly people here, but really any kind of shot, you can play around with the color balance to get your own tone. Jordan says, if you were going to start with just a tangent panel for adjustments, what would it be? Well, I think a really good combination, if you're not interested in the color grading aspect, what is a good combination is the dials. So let's just view that product. So that is KB for knob. See if we've got some different pictures. So this one here, which dials all the adjustments, and you've got 3 separate banks. So you've actually got, what have we got there? 6, 12, 24, 36 different dials, and each bank can actually have an alternate set. So you've actually got 72 in total. So this is great for adjustments, and actually this one you can use for selection, rating, for local adjustment brushes, changing the size and opacity. And through not too much work, you could actually configure this to do shadows, midtones, highlights for color balance. You just have to flip through some different banks, for example. So I would say this one and this one is a good starter pack as such, but this one on its own, works great for just adjustments. Mark says, could we send images direct to other apps like Portrait Professional? Yes, but it's only going to be final TIFF or JPEG. So if you do edit with, so right click on any image and say edit with, you can choose your application here or say other, and then it will take a TIFF or JPEG to that app, which you can then adjust, but bearing in mind it's not a raw file, and then it will return it back to the Capture One catalog or session and put it alongside the raw file. And then once you've done that, you can then say open with, and then you can open your TIFF JPEG into your application of choice. But remember, it's not going to be raw. So if you're happy with that, that's fine. Yes, you can change assignments quickly on the panels. You can actually save different maps. If we go, hang on, tangent, I've lost my, there we go, tangent mapper, that's the app. So it's all totally configurable, as you can see, and then you can save any of your control maps as well. So easy peasy. And again, it's easy to share those maps. They're just basic XML text files. Okay, is there a Danish version of the keyboard? It's currently available as UK, US, and also German as well, as far as I know. It is Mac only. I mean, it's a USB keyboard, so technically it will work on a PC, but because of the marking of the keys like the command button and so on, it'll be slightly kind of off for PC, but to be honest, there's no reason why you couldn't use it. Is Capture One a tangent project? No. Sorry, is the Capture One keyboard a tangent product? No, the keyboard is made by Logic. The hardware input decks you saw are made by Tangent, so 2 different companies. Okay. When I do edit with, I do not see the updated file show back up. Well, make sure you're actually saying edit with, not open with. You must do edit with to trigger the creation of additional file. So make sure you'll do edit with. That's very important. Okay, so let's just check. I'm a bit more efficient this afternoon than this morning, as always. So I think we've pretty much covered all of the tool. Just remember that color balance is not the same as white balance. So color balance, to reiterate, for a color grade over the entire image. The color editor is designed for picking out colors and changing the appearance of those colors. The color balance tool works nicely in conjunction with things like the saturation slider, just to change the intensity of your adjustments, and you can save any preset by saying use a preset, and a combination of those adjustments can be saved as a user style like so. Makes sense to set up a color grading workspace just for easy reach of, oh, that wasn't the latest one, my color grading like so. And again, add the workspace icon to the toolbar so you can easily switch between your workspaces like so without having to go into the tool menu like so. And this is my preferred combination: master, three-way, and exposure tool like so. Then of course we can use shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts, just to move through your images nice and quickly without having to get back to the browser, for example. We can just use our next image shortcuts to go through. Oh, this is a preview of actually the presets. So if we go, let's just get my viewer labels up. So where's our first one? So this one here, the various presets, this is bluish shadows and warm highlights, for example. And then we've got old school cyan. Then we've got old school purple. Whoops, wrong shortcut. Even I get shortcuts wrong sometimes. That's why it's good to have a keyboard. I managed to hit select all for some reason. So where were we? This was old school cyan. Then we've got old school purple. And then we've got our reddish cast like so. So they're available for Mac and PC. Download in the follow-up email with instructions on where to place them as well. All things like styles and presets in Capture One. If you go to your Finder for Mac, hold down your Alt key so you get Library pop up as it's hidden. Application Support, Capture One, then all the kind of presets like keyboard shortcuts. We've got our where are they? Presets. There's the color balance presets, metadata presets, process recipes, and so on. They're all stored in that folder. The PC location is a bit different, but that's also in the follow-up email as well. Okay, last few questions. Let's see. Is the tangent wireless? No, they're just basic USB. So simple plug and play USB. I've had 4 panels connected on one hub. Very reliable connection. I'd actually much prefer that than mucking about with wireless, to be honest. So they're just basic USB. Okay, so the edit with, Stefan's asking, creates a TIFF first, and you would save in the external tool over the copy created by Capture One. Yes, so when you say edit with, it's going to create that TIFF and then open it up in Photoshop, for example, and then when you save it, let's just actually do it so you can see where are. So right click, let's say edit with, let's make a JPEG, and we're going to go into Photoshop if Creative Cloud will let me. So we'll say that. It will export our variant. Probably should have picked something less than 100 megapixels, but it's relatively quick. That will now open up into, let's see, be kind. So that will now open up into Photoshop, which we could then do for further editing, for example. Let's just get that tool out the way. And you see there's the JPEG sitting down here, like so, because I've manually sorted these images. Oh, it's still opening in Photoshop. Hang on. Oh, because I had the license agreement. So let's say open with Photoshop, like so. So now if I did a crop, let me just crop this drastically, for example. And then close that. So I save the changes. Like so, and then you see it updates in Capture One automatically. Now, if I want to open this again, I right click and say open this with Photoshop, and then like so. So just make sure you do that edit with process. Okay. Last two questions. Is there a shortcut to modify the brush size in local adjustments? Yes. As Drew's already said, if you're on a brush, use your square brackets to make it bigger and smaller. Shift square bracket to change the hardness, which is the same as Photoshop. And David says, are you using the MacBook Pro, a new MacBook Pro? Yes, I am actually. It's been working out great, even though it's had kind of bad publicity, probably because Apple didn't do a great job of marketing it. It's actually dead fast. I like the touch bar. USB-C I actually quite like as well. And yeah, everything about it's great really, apart from the price. But otherwise it's a great machine. Do you open directly to Photoshop with adjustments? No. Remember, once you edit with, you're creating a TIFF file from your raw file. So yes, it's got the adjustments, but you're looking at a TIFF file as opposed to a raw file. So adjustments in Capture One aren't going to show in Photoshop, but they will be reflected in the exports, for example. Okay, before we run out of time, just to let you know that next week might not be relevant to you guys here, for example, but next webinar, February 16th, is all about Capture One for Sony. We do have a free version of the app for Sony. And there's also the Pro version as well. So if you know anyone with a Sony who hasn't tried Capture One yet, maybe send them along to this webinar for next week. Sign up details in the follow-up email. There you've actually got a better look of what the Capture One keyboard looks like, and also the new MacBook Pro. So yes, you can see the full kit there, for example. Also in the follow-up email, there's the location for the recording, download for the presets, and so on, if you want to have a look at those. Okay, there we go. Alrighty, so many thanks for your time today. I'm afraid, Pamela, there isn't a discount code for Tangent products, but just talk to your Phase One dealer. They might be running options and promotions and so on. So just have a word with your local Phase One partner. There's a partner locator on our webpage if you wish. So, okay. Alrighty, many thanks for your time, and I hope to see you all again at the next webinar and throughout February and March as well. Take care.